Hey guys, I'm back with a new video. In this video we will make a simple to-do list. So let us discuss about the features that we will create in this project. So first we want the ability to add a new item to our list of to-dos. Then we want the ability to delete an item from the list of to-dos. Then we want the ability to filter to-do items based on some search term. Then finally we want the ability to persist the state of our to-do list. So enough of talking, let us first lay down the markup for our to-do list. And for that I will be using a CSS library known as tailwindcss. So let us first lay down the markup for our project. Let us set the title. So to-do list. Right here I will include the CSS for tailwindcss. So we are using a CDN here and I'm using the version 1.4.6. You can get the CDN in the starter files for this repo. So the link for that can be found down below. And right here let us lay down the markup. So I will define a to-do list class, and inside this div let us define a component. So a div with a class of h100, which is a tailwind CSS class. It sets the height, okay, so in rems. So for 20 you can see it is 5 rems. So if we take for 100, it will be 100 divided by 4, and this comes out to be 25 rems. So our to-do list will have a height of, or the container holding the to-do list will have a height of 25 rems. I can set the width as full, and I want this to be flex. So items should be centered and justify center. So we are using flexbox model. Here we are saying align items as center and justify content as center. Then right here I will set the background as teal, lightest, and font as sans. Right here I will define another div and let us set the class on this. So background should be white, bg white, rounded, and shadow. Then padding is 6 all around. So if we go here and check this out, p6, here you can see p6 is equivalent to a padding of 1.5 rems. So from all the sides we are setting up a padding of 1.5 rem from all the sides, and then set up a margin of 4, so m-4, and then width should be full. Then on the last screen I want width to be 3/4 of the fluid width. So what do we mean by this? You can see it says fluid width. So width hyphen and some fraction, it sets an element to a percentage based width. So like this. So 1/4 of this entire width is light in color, as you can see, and 3/4 is this dark gray region. So this is how we can define the width with respect to some percentage, or you can say fraction. And we are doing this for a last screen. Then I can set up the max width. So max hyphen width, and set that to LG, large. Right here let us set up a margin bottom of 4, and h1 dot, I'll give this a class of 3xl, text 3xl, and text center. So let me show you what we mean by this class. So text 3xl. So you can see text xl will give us a font size of 1.25 rem. I'm interested in using this font size of 1.875 rems. So we are using text hyphen 3xl. And text center, we all know it, text aligns the element to the center. And here I will say to-do list. So now let us run the live server to see what we are getting for this markup. So I'll open the file with live server, and here is what we are currently getting. So now right after the h1 I will define a form, and here I will give this a class of flex and margin top as 4. And right inside the form let us define an input field, and I will set a name attribute of item, and let us define a class shadow appearance as none. Then we want a border, we want this to be rounded, width should be full, padding along the y-axis to be 2, so vertical padding will be 2. Along the horizontal axis I want a padding of 3, and a margin of 4 from the right, and text gray darker. And here let us define the placeholder add to do. So now let us see what we are getting. So this looks good, and you can see we are also getting a border. And right after the input field, let us define button. So button, I will give this a class of bg-transparent to have a transparent background. And on hover, the background for the button should change to blue. So let us see this in action. Let us add some text here. Let us set a class of text blue 700 and font semi bold. On hover, we want the text to be white. Let us set a vertical padding of 2 border, then border hyphen blue 500, and on hover I want the border to be transparent and rounded. And now let us see what we are getting. Okay, so this looks good. So now right after the div, let us define unordered list, which will hold all our to-do items. So and I will give this a class of list flex, then flex column. So flex direction is column for this. Background gray 300 and padding 4 all around. So this is what we are currently getting. So now let us move forward to our JavaScript. So now let us start coding our to-do application piece by piece. So right here, let us add the script for our file, for our JavaScript file app.js, and let us go to app.js. So let us first attach a listener on the window object, and we'll listen for the DOM content loaded event and wait for the DOM content to get loaded. Once the DOM content gets loaded, I will call the initialize app function. Now let us create an array of to-do items. So for that I can say let to-do items, set that to an empty list, and right here let us define the initialize app function, and inside it I will set up my references to DOM elements. So function initialize app. So here I can say set references and invoke that, and let us go right above and set up some variables. But before that, let us also log here init the app or inside the app. So right here I will set up some variables to hold the references to our DOM elements, like the add to do form, the list of to dos, and the input box. So let to do form, to do list, and the input box. And now right here let us define our set references function. So set references and to do form. So I can reach out to the DOM and select the to do form by using this. So I can query select that by the element type that we're using, which is form. So now we have a reference for our form. Let us grab one for to do list. So document.query selector, and it has a class of list, then a reference for our input box, document.query selector. Our input box has an ID of item. I forgot to add that. Let us add it here. So ID item, and we can select by the ID. So now right here inside our initialize app function, I will define a do event bindings function. So let us invoke that right here and then define that function. So do event bindings. So now let us define my event bindings function, and here I will bind all my event listeners to DOM elements for which we have already collected the references. So I'll use the event delegation model. The idea behind that is attach a single event listener to our list of elements instead of attaching an event listener on each of the items of our list. As we will be working with the click event on the to-do list items, it will eventually bubble up from the target point to the list. So attaching a single event listener to the list makes more sense. And if you are not aware about the concept of event delegation, the link for that video can be found down below. So function do event bindings, and let us log here inside the do event bindings call. So here let us attach a submit event listener on the to do form, and when the submit event will occur, it will trigger the handle item submit function that we will define in just a minute. So I can say to do form dot add event listener, and I will listen for the submit event on the form, and once that occurs, we will trigger the function handle items submission. So right here let us define the function handle item submission, and this will receive the event object. So handle item submission. For now let us write a simple log and go back to the browser to see what we get. Console log handle item submission, and I will log the event object to the console. So let us go back and open our console, our developer console. Okay, so we are getting inside the app from our initialize app function. Then our do event bindings call. So our event bindings are now done, and if I click on add, you can see the page got reloaded. So to prevent the default behavior of form submission, right here event.prevent the default behavior, and this we have learned in the video on events. So if you are not aware of the concept behind this, the link for the video on events can be found down below this video. So let us again click on add, and you can see we are getting handle item submission. The event type is submit. So right here down below, let us get the input term from the input box. First what I will do is I will destructure out the item from the current target of the event. So const item event dot current target, and let us log the item dot value to the console. So console dot log item dot value, and here is the item content, and let us see this in action. Okay, so it says this whatever we wrote, and here is the item content. Now next what I want to do is, if the user doesn't specify an input term in the input box, then we will simply return from the function, and this will stop the execution of the remaining code that we are going to define in just a minute. So if item dot value dot trim, so if there is nothing specified in the input box, then you can simply return. Next let us create a to do item, and it will have a name, an ID, and a complete property, which is a boolean that indicates whether the to do item was completed or not and is still in progress. So const to do item, and I will set the name property, set that to item dot value, and I will lowercase that, then set up an ID, and I will use backticks, so v0, and then to get a number I can say to do items dot length +1, and complete property, which of course in the start will be false. Now once we have created the to do item, let us add the to do item to our array of to do items, which you can see is currently empty. So I can say to do items dot push to do item, and let us log to the console. There are now to do items dot length items in the state, and let us log the to do items to the terminal. And now once the to do item is created, we will reset the form to its original state. So for that I can simply say to do form dot reset. So let us go back to the browser to see what we get. So right here I will define a to do, create a Java tutorial, and add that. Okay, so it says create a Java tutorial. Here is the item content. Then you can see there are now 1 items in the state, and you can see this is the to do that we added to our list of to do items. So it has a complete property of false, an ID of v01, and the name property as well. So now we can define another method, render items, and pass our to do items to it in order to render the items to the DOM. But I don't want my methods to be tightly coupled to each other. So rather than doing that, we'll fire off a custom event that will tell every other component of the application that our to-do list got updated and then perform some action based on that. So right here what I will do is I will dispatch an event from the to-do list by saying to-do list dot dispatch event, and this will be a custom event. So let us create a custom event and I will name it as items modified. Now next, right inside that do event bindings function, I will attach an event listener on the to-do list and will listen for the custom event that we just dispatched. So to-do list dot add event listener. So I'll listen for the custom event items modified that we dispatched in our handle item submission function. And once our list listens to that event, we'll trigger the render items function that I will define in just a minute, and this will render our list of items right after a new addition. So let us go right above and define our render items function. So right here, let us define the render items function. So I can say render items. So first I will check whether we do have a to-do item in our to-do items list. If we don't have one, I will define another function that will render a message to the DOM to inform the user to add an item to the empty list. So if to-do items dot length is 0, I will return and I will invoke a function 0 items message, and we will return it from right here so that the code below doesn't get executed if we have 0 items in our list. So right here, let us define the 0 items message function, and I will prepare some HTML here, and we will have a h1 element with a class text-xl text center, which is a tailwind CSS class. Add an item to the to-do list, and then let us replace our inner HTML of the to-do list with this message. So to-do list dot inner HTML, set that to HTML. Now if we reach this line, it means we have multiple to-do items in our array. So let us map over the to-do items and return the markup for our list item. So let's add some tailwind CSS classes to make the UI look a bit better. So const HTML to-do items dot map. For each item, let us return a list item. I will prepare it dynamically, li, and I will set a class of border gray 400 and flex row, margin bottom, set that to 2. Then a div right inside the li tag, and let us give this a class of select-none. And if you search it here, so you can see it is for controlling whether the user can select a text in an element or not. So if I try to select this with my cursor, I'm not able to select it. Okay, so this is what we mean by select-none. Then let us set up the cursor property to pointer. So cursor pointer and background gray 200 rounded on medium screen, and flex 1 items center, padding 4 all around. Transition, let us define a transition as well, and I want the duration to be 500. Ease in out and transform hover. On hover I want translate -translate y1. So I want a translation by 1 unit along the vertical axis, and on hover I want the shadow. And right inside this div I will define another div. I'll give it a class of flex1, a padding from left 1, margin right 16, and within this div I will have yet another div with a class of font -medium. Let us set an item ID for this, so an ID item.id, and here we can render the name of the item, so item.name. Then right after this div, I will define another div. I will give it a class of text gray 600 and text XS, which means extra small, and button, I will give it a name attribute of complete item. So this button will basically, whenever the user will click on this button, the to-do item pertaining to that button or the item in which this button is residing will get set to completed once you click on this button. So I will give it a area label and set that to mark complete and item.name. Let us give this button a class of flex, no shrink on screen sizes, and padding of 2 all around, a margin left of 4 units, a margin right of 2 units, border of 2 and rounded. Then on hover, I want the text to be white, and now let us set text as green, border also as green, and on hover I want the background to be green. And let us use an emoji here. So for completion we have an emoji. So I have an extension for getting the emojis, so I can say GI heavy check. Yeah, this heavy check mark. I'll select this out, got the emoji, and let us paste it right here. Now let us define the same button but for the removal case. So whenever someone will click this button pertaining to some to-do item, the to-do item will get deleted from the list of to-dos. So let us copy the markup for the complete button and let us make some changes here. So button name, this will be remove item, area label will be remove item.name, and let us change the green text to red, border also to red, and background red as well. And here I will again get the emoji for the cross marks, so cross. Okay, so this is the emoji for cross. You can directly write this inside your text content for the button element. So now our li element is done. Let us convert this to a string join with a single quotes. Okay, so not here, here. Yeah, we are getting an array of list items, and each list item in this case is some HTML, some markup. Okay, so we have to basically concatenate the markup for all the list items that we are having in the to-do items to form a string out of that. So we are using the join method on the array that we are getting. So now we have all our to-do items mapped to list items, and now we have the string as well. We can directly set this HTML string to our inner HTML of the to-do list. So to-do list dot inner HTML, set that to HTML. So now let us go back to our do event bindings function and let us define the logic for marking a to-do item as complete and removing a to-do item. So right here I will again use the event delegation model and attach an event listener for the click event on the to-do list. And once the click event occurs, from within the list we will trigger a new function, and I will name it as handle item completion or removal. So right here let us define the handle item completion or removal function, and this will receive the event object handle item completion or removal. So first let us check whether we clicked on a button or something else. So as we know, we have two buttons in our markup for the list item, one to mark a to-do as completed, which is this heavy check mark, and one to remove a to-do from the list. So I can say if the target of the event matches the button element, if event dot target matches the button element, then let us first try to grab the ID of the to-do item by performing some simple DOM traversal. So let us examine the DOM structure. So create Java tutorials and add. Let us go to the elements tab, and right inside the UL tag we have the li tag, and then we have the div tag within which we have the to do content getting rendered. So what we want is we want to get the ID of our to do item. If we click on one of the buttons, I want to get the ID of the to do item pertaining to which the button was clicked. Here we have the ID of V01 for this list item, so I want to grab that. Once we have the to do item with us by its ID, we can reach out to the item in our to do list, items array, and then we can either mark it complete or we can remove it. Okay, so let us perform the first step to get a reference for the list item by its ID. So what we can do is, if the event target matches the button, so if the button was clicked, I can say const item ID event dot target and reach out to the parent element of that right here. If we see the structure again, so let us create a to do. Let us inspect this out. So this is our button element. If we reach out to the parent element, we will get this div. Then if we reach out to the previous element sibling, then we will get this div. And inside this div, I want the first element child, which is this div. And this div's ID is V01, which will give us the item of the ID which is under consideration. Event.target.parent element dot previous element sibling dot first element child dot ID. Let us break this down. So this is the item ID. On our buttons, we have the name attribute set to remove item on the button that removes the to do item, and complete item on the button that marks the to do item as complete. So let us check for event.target.names. So I can use the switch statement event.target.name. So if the name attribute of the target button is remove item, we will invoke a remove item function that I will define in just a minute, and we will pass on the item ID to it. So if the event.target name is remove item, so if the button that removes the item was clicked, then we will run the function remove item and pass on the item ID of the item that we want to remove, and then we can break it right here. Otherwise, if we want to mark an item as complete, we can make a function mark for completion, and if the name attribute of the target button is complete item, we'll then invoke a mark for completion function, pass on the item ID to it that we just grabbed to this function. Let us define both of these functions in just a minute. So then as a default case, let's break out. So right here, let us define the remove item function, and this will take on the item ID as the argument. So let us remove the item whose item ID is passed to us as the argument. So what we can do is we can make use of the filter method, and this will give us all the to do items back except the one whose ID was given to us for removal right here. So I can say to do items dot filter, and for each item, if the item ID doesn't match with the item ID that is given to us as an argument to the remove item function, we can save that. Otherwise, if the item ID matches with the one that we are looking for, then it will get removed. So now our to do item got deleted from the list of to dos. Let us reflect that in our UI. Now it is time to inform other components of the application that our item just got modified, that it just got deleted. So I will again dispatch the same items modified event, which is a custom event. So I can say to do list dot dispatch event and new custom event items modified. And what will happen in this case is that this event will get dispatched, and right here our list will listen for this event items modified, and it will again re-render our list of items reflecting the changes that occurred, and we will get the new state for our list items. So let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. So first I will create a to-do. So create Java tutorials, and let us click on this button to see if this item gets removed or not. Okay, so this is not working as of now. So what is the problem here? So this should be item ID and not item. So let us go back to the browser and create a to-do, create JavaScript tutorials, and let us click on this button to remove the item. And you can see this works. Once the item was removed, what happened was that the render items function was called, and it checked for whether the to-do item's length is 0, which indeed is 0, and then it rendered the 0 items message as inner HTML of our to-do list, and that's why we were getting that message. So now our remove item function is done. Let us define our other function, which is mark for completion, and this will also take on the item ID as the parameter. So function mark for completion, it takes on item ID, and let us log the to-do items to the console. So first let us find out the to-do item whose completion property we want to toggle. So for that I can say const item to-do items, and I can use the find method, and that will return us the very first item which matches the check that we will define right inside the find method. And we want the item whose ID matches with the ID that we are looking for. So once we get the item, we can log that to the terminal, and let us go back to the browser to see what we get. Let us create some bunch of to-dos here. So create JavaScript tutorials, play Counter-Strike, play football, and let us click on one of the heavy check marks for one of the to-do list items. And now you can see we are getting the item which was clicked, which has a name property of play Counter-Strike, an ID of v02, and complete property set to false. So now we have the item in our hand. What we now want to do is we need to toggle its complete property, and that is very simple to do. So I will make a log here and say item before toggling gets completed. Item. Let us delete this line. So now to toggle the complete property, I can say item.complete, set that to the negative of that. So if it was true, it will be converted to false. If it was false, then it will be converted to true. And now since we have made a change to our to-do item, let us again dispatch our custom event to inform the application that this item of our list just got modified. So to-do list dot dispatch event, and I will dispatch a new custom event. So items modified, and once the state of one of our to-dos gets changed, that is its complete property gets inverted from true to false or false to true, this event will get dispatched. And once our list listens to this event, the custom event, it will again re-render the list of items by invoking this function, and then inside the render items function it will prepare the markup again to reflect the changes. So let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. So let us create some to-dos. So now if I click on the check mark for one of the to-dos, so say the first one, and you can see it says item before toggling gets completed, complete property set to false. And after that, let's print this out here as well. So item after toggling gets completed, go back to the browser, okay. So if I click on this, you can see item before toggling gets completed, complete property was false initially. Now once we click on the check mark, it gets toggled to true. If we again click on this check mark, it gets converted from true to false. And if we click on this cross button, you can see it's gone. So now mark for completion is now done. Let us now add an event listener to our form and listen for the key up event And when that happens, let us trigger the function handle filter list to filter out the list of to-dos based on the search term and update our UI for the list to reflect that. So I can say to-do form dot add event listener, and on the key up event I can call a function handle filter list, and this will filter out the list item based on the search term. So let us go right above, and right here I will define the function handle filter list, and this will receive the event object as the parameter. So function handle filter list. So we want all those items that do not contain the search term in their name property. So for that I can say to do items dot filter for each item if the item dot name dot to lowercase. So we'll convert the item name to lowercase version of that, and then we will filter out all such items that doesn't contain the search term that we typed. So I can say item dot name, I'll convert that to lowercase and then apply the includes method on that. Then whatever the user typed, we can get that by saying event.target.value and convert that to lowercase as well. And the filter method will give us all such to-dos. So for each to-do, for each item that we get, we'll grab the item's ID and query select that item by its ID. So I can say const to-do item document dot query selector and hash item dot ID. So now we have the item with us. Let us find the closest li and add a class of filtered in order to set the display property of it to none. So what I will do is I'll go right inside my index.html file, and here I will define a style tag and define a class of filtered, set the display property as none and not important. So I can say to do item, I'll try to find the closest li, and to that li I will add the class of filtered. So all those items that do not contain the search term will get filtered out and will not get rendered in our UI. Now let us copy the above code down below. And now I want the list of all those to-dos from our original to-dos where the name property of the to-do item does contain the search term. If it doesn't contain the search term, then it will get filtered out, and otherwise we'll get the item which does have the search term inside it. And here, if the item does contain the search term on that item, we have to remove the filtered class in order for it to get rendered in our UI. So now let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. So right here I will create some to-dos. Okay, so you can see it works. If I say play cricket, you are getting that. So next let us add local storage to our to-do application. Now if you see the application carefully, if I create a new to-do like create JavaScript tutorials and add that, and then create more to-dos, so making a game, add that. Now if I reload the page, you can see the state of our application is lost. The to-dos are no longer there. So the entire application gets reset to its initial configuration and we have lost the entire state of the application. So now is the time to add local storage to our application in order to add a persistence layer to our application where we will store our to-dos, and each time we reload our application, we will get our to-dos from local storage and not from memory where it is empty, as you can see. So on each reset of our application, we will be having our to-dos from our local storage. Each time you add a new to-do, it will get committed to local storage and the changes will get reflected in the UI where we will be pulling those items from the local storage. So let us add local storage to our application. So right here on our to-do list, I will listen for the items modified event that we dispatched once we remove an item and once we add a new item to our to-do list on line number 35, and even on marking an item as completed, we also dispatched an event at line number 86. So now what we want is, once the items got modified, that custom event is emitted, we have to listen for that event. And in that thing, what will happen is the render items function will get called, and we can also update our local storage. So our list will listen for the items modified event and will trigger the function update local storage. So right here, let us define the function update local storage. And here we will commit our items to our local storage. So for that, we will serialize our to-do items by using json.stringify. So I can say json.stringify, and let us refer to our to-do items. So this is a list of to-do items. We are stringifying that to convert it to JSON, and we are passing the list of to-do items to that and set the serialized data items that we get from this method to the items property of our local storage object, local storage dot items, like this. And let us log here inside the local storage, and now let us log the local storage dot items to the console. Local storage dot items, and let us go back to the browser to see what we get. So if I now create a new to-do item, playing football, and press enter, so now you can see we are adding the to-do item to our list of to-dos, and we are also committing the item to the local storage, but we are not pulling it from local storage. If I reload the application, you can see we are no longer having the to-do item with us. But if I click on inspect and go to the console, and let us add another to-do, create a game, add that to our list of to-dos, you can see we are now having a to-do item in our local storage. And if I reload the application, and right here if I log local storage.items and press enter, you can see we are getting the newly created to-do item right inside our local storage. Now what we need to do is we need to pull this to-do item and render it in our to-do list. And even if we reload the application, we want that to-do item to get rendered to our list of to-dos. So we want persistence in our application. So even if the user closes the tab, we want that the state of the application should be preserved. So for that, what we need to do is we need to pull out these local storage items and render that right here in our list of to-dos. So let us see how we can do this. So now we are having the items in our local storage. Let us pull them out. So let us go back to our initialize app function, which is right here, and right below the do event bindings function, let us define a pull from local storage function. So first let us invoke it here, and I will define it in just a minute. So pull from local storage. So right here let us define the pull from local storage function. So I can say function pull from local storage, and let us write a simple log pulling items from the local storage. And now in order to pull the to-do items from the local storage, we'll first need to deserialize our items in order to get them as an array of objects by using json.parse. And here I will refer the serialized to-do items, which we can get by saying local storage.items, and we can store them in a variable to-do items from local storage. So now we have pulled out the to-do items from the local storage. Let us see whether we did got some items or an empty array of to-do items. So to check for that, I can say to-do items from local storage dot length. So if we did got to-do items from the local storage, I can spread out all the to-do items that we got in our to-do items array by saying to-do items dot push, and I will use the spread operator and spread out the to-do items from local storage. So now we are getting or pulling all the to-do items from local storage and setting them in our memory, which is the to-do items array. And each time we reset our application, what will happen is that this pull from local storage function will get invoked as a result of DOM content being loaded, and this will pull out all the local storage items, will deserialize them, and then we can set them right here in our list of to-dos. So now let us inform the app that the items have been modified, that is, there is a state change. And finally, in order to inform the application that our list state was changed, because it fetched the items from local storage, I can again dispatch the custom event items modified. So to-do list.dispatch event items modified, and this will be a new custom event. Else if we didn't got any items from local storage, we'll just render our 0 items message. So let us invoke that right here, 0 items message, like this. So let us go back to the browser to see if it works or not. So now you can see we are pulling the item from the local storage, and this works fine. If we delete the item, you can see it got reflected in our local storage as well, and now the local storage is empty. Let us reload the application, and you can see the state still persists. Let us add some to-do items to check the overall functionality of the application. Creating JavaScript tutorials, playing taken 5. If we try to filter out an item by saying playing, you can see we are getting this playing taken 5. If I mark this as complete, you can see the completed property got toggled from false to true. So this works fine as well. And if we delete a to-do item and reload the application, you can see this works fine as well. So this was all about the video on making a to-do list using JavaScript with the ability to persist our to-dos in local storage, filtering the items out, adding a new to-do item, deleting an existing to-do item. We also designed our to-do list using a design framework called as tailwindcss, which I might use in some future video as well. So if you liked the video, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to get the notification for all the upcoming uploads, and I will see you guys in the very next one.